får vi också er uppmärksamhet kanske en liten stund. Yeah. I can move. Awesome. I'm going to do the English part. Do you want to do the Swedish part? Awesome. Hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Colors of Africa Festival.
Hej allihopa! Hej allihopa! Ni är varmt välkomna till Colors of Afrikas festival. Vi verkligen ser fram emot det här och blir väldigt studera mer.
Alright, so the people standing here in front of you, quick introduction. My name is Mercy Mbalazi. I am one of the arranging partners of Colors of Africa. Together with me, I have this co-hosting lady over here, Uba Kamara.
Hej!
Hey, and straight from Laguinifer. And she has done us the pleasure of bringing her team. So Uba, please introduce yourself and the team.
Hej! Mitt namn är Uba och jag är en medlem av en förening som heter Laguinifer. Vi i grunden har musik från Västafrika och Guinea där vi har olika evenemang och klasser runt om Stockholm och runt Sverige. Och vi kommer att spela lite för er lite senare under kvällen och eftermiddagen.
Vilka har du med dig idag?
Jag har med mig Melissa som jag vill se lite där bak. Och sen har jag Mona Hammarna som är också dansare och representerat Sverige så många gånger. Som kommer prata och dansa på oss här.
Och Mona är ganska häftig. Hon är också grundaren av Ubuntu Base som är en väldigt grym organisation. Och mycket dans också där. Och Mona kommer ni se mycket utav idag faktiskt. Det finns ju flera här bakom mig, or there are more people behind me. I'm going to do the Swedish thing, okay? Let's do that. So with me I have my team. We have Ivan. Nurjahan. And our own nurse Aisha. So again, this is our third year of organizing Colors of Africa here in Stockholm, and we're very happy to have you here and being able to support us through this period of time. We have a rigorous program for you today. There's a lot on that program. Let me see if I can remember everything. So we have poetry by lovely Melissa. She'll come by herself and introduce later on. We also have traditional dancing represented by our lovely co-hosts Laguinifer and Ubuntu Base. We're going to have great DJs. We have a market, as you haven't missed it. There's a market here, and the market is going to be open between 1 until 7 o'clock tonight. Oh, sorry, 8 o'clock tonight. So stick around. There's a lot of things that are going to happen. Nej. Without further ado, we're gonna get started and yeah, let you know. Oh, by the way, very important information. We do have sip and paint for the ones who want to paint and do that. And to do that, please register. There will be somebody standing by the entrance for you, so you can let them know, because that will cost about 50 crowns. But then you get 2 drinks with that, and colors, and a few snacks. All right? Oh yeah, and the schedule has been moved a little bit, so we're running a little bit late. But we will be up here, myself and Uba, to introduce and announce whomever is coming up. Tack så mycket, and stay tuned for the next. topic, especially for people in our community, but people everywhere in general. Mental health is something that we all hear about a lot, everywhere for sure. But one of the most important things is feeling comfortable, feeling safe, and being secure in the conversations with therapists. For some of us, maybe even most of us, sometimes that safe place is not really created because we have experiences or we're carrying histories that cannot really be comprehended at the same way with the people we may be talking to. And this is why this talk becomes so important. The talk today is going to be about cultural safety in therapy, building trust and connection. And the two persons, these lovely ladies that are going to host it, are Jabu Fon from Suma Heaven and our own nurse Aisha. I'm going to let you ladies actually introduce the topic, what you're going to touch base on, and a little bit more about Suma Heaven, because that's very important, right? Super. Leading over time.
Hi everyone, my name is Aisha. I'm here with Colors of Africa and also Nurse Aisha. So this lady over here, Jabu Fu, is a coach, and you actually appeared on my platform last year as we talked about mental health for our community. And the reason we talk about mental health for people of color, anyone that defines themselves as a person of color, African or otherwise, knows that there's a lot of stigma connected to mental health, depression, and everything in between. So today we're going to talk about mental health, cultural safety in therapy, building trust and connection. That is the topic. And you, Jabu, please introduce yourself first.
Hello, my name is Jabu, and I am, as you said, previously a coach. I'm also educated therapist now, stress therapist, and I've spent, well, most of my working years actually within corporate, so HR. And when I started on this journey, it was really due to my own experience with challenges with mental health. And so it was that and an interest in psychology, ironically. So when I was young, I wanted to be a psychologist. And my parents were like, we think it's better for you to walk towards the lawyer or the economist type of route. And I was a good girl, so I listened, and I kind of put that aside. And then I decided to go into becoming a lawyer, and then I didn't like that, so I ended up in HR. But then, as I was sort of working through the ranks of being in leadership and senior leadership roles, I discovered more and more how lonely it is to be the only black person in the room. And with that, I started to go towards more diversity and inclusion. So my last corporate role was a diversity and inclusion advisor for a large multinational organization. And I was so stressed out in that role that I decided to resign and burn out. Yeah. And as I was looking for help and support in this, I realized that the people that I was talking to, as in the therapist I was approaching, didn't really understand the context I was living in. And I figured that there's got to be other people out there who have the same experience. And so I started to deep dive into this area and discovered, I actually did some interviews for a good year with different people to ask them what was their experience of mental health and what was their experience of addressing different therapists. And the conversations were, and the information I got was quite problematic. Everything from being gaslighted in sessions to being told that they're thinking it the wrong way. So with that, I decided to create something called Suma Haven, which is a platform that connects people of color and actually other ethnic minority backgrounds with therapists and psychologists from ethnic minority backgrounds. And so the idea is to create a culturally safe environment where you can find someone who speaks your language or someone who can at least relate to the cultural context in which you come from. And it's not just that they are experts, they're still licensed people who licensed therapists and psychologists. There's also unlicensed ones that have the training. But the difference is that we actually specifically have now developed a training that gets them to focus on practicing therapy from a decolonial and anti-racist perspective. So, that is what we do. That was a long introduction,
It was,
sorry.
and you went through one of the questions to talk about what Suma Haven is.
Yeah.
But before we go all that way, I wanted to ask you to define mental health, because we're talking about therapy already, but we haven't really defined what mental health. If you could, short.
In short space of time? Yeah, okay. So mental health, at least if you look at it from the definition of the WHO, is it's a state of being, of well-being, where you are able to cope with stressors, daily stressors. You're able to cope with self-actualization. So you're able to really live a healthy and good life, right? And that's the paraphrasing of it. Whereas with mental illness, it's really that you're not coping with those sides of your life. And that includes also being active in your community, being someone who can just go about their daily lives in the way that you normally do.
Because life is hard.
Yeah.
You have to be able to get the tools that you need to cope. So if you could tell us the difference between mental disorder and actual mental illness or disease, the difference.
Yeah, so there's a historical context with that. So mental disease was something that people spoke about in the 1800s, right? So that was more where people weren't so knowledgeable in psychiatry, so they looked at it as the same as a physical illness, effectively. And that's also where the stigma started to come from. Because people thought, okay, there's something wrong with this person from that perspective. Mental illness is the evolution of that. Because now you understood that there's a separation between the body and the mind from that perspective. And so mental illness is really about you having, it's a broader term that describes an emotional state or a mental state, but it also includes clinical diagnosis, whereas mental disorder is only clinical diagnosis. So it's a classification.
I feel that we're used more to the disorder, where it's extreme, and we see people going through stuff with shows, while mental illness is something that you cannot really touch base on, you can't really see it on a person. So they go about their days and they look just like you and me, or anybody sitting here, but with a mental illness.
Yeah. Where they don't feel that they necessarily have control over their emotional regulation.
Something
in
like
some ways.
Anxiety, for instance. Anybody heard of anxiety?
Yeah.
A lot of people live with anxiety and not showing.
I think what's important to note is that all of these things you can have in short spaces of time. So I could go outside and I'm stressed because I'm late for a meeting. That's different to having prolonged sense of stress that goes over weeks or even months or more, right? So that's the difference.
And then we have the depression, which a lot of people actually use very lightly.
Yes.
I feel depressed.
Yes.
Is that something, if you could...
But you can also have a clinical diagnosis of depression.
Okay. So why is it such stigmatized? in our community?
I think you have to go back to our history, right? So because we've been sort of inheriting a lot of generational trauma, but also because of the situations that we normally find ourselves in, whether that's from a socioeconomic perspective or any other, where we're facing perhaps racism or other aspects that sort of hamper our well-being, that has taught us somehow to always be the strong people, right? We always have to be strong in order to cope with what we're going through.
So we can't break.
And so that means, inadvertently, if you're looking for help or you're looking at those aspects, it may be deemed as weak, right? And so it's an inherited point of view that impacts how we operate in terms of seeking help for mental health, and also being able to talk about it openly with our loved ones and people, because there's a lot of people out there who don't feel okay, but they hide it in order to cope.
I feel as though it also comes down to that there's not one a treatment, a direct treatment, aside from having a fever or something that you can actually see and treat and go to the doctor as well. Mental illness, you can't really understand it at that moment that I need help.
Yeah, I think it's a gradual self-awareness, right? So a lot of the times, and unfortunately this is what we do, we wait until it's almost too late, or not too late, but it's so far gone that we're maybe at a stage where you can't even get out of bed because you just feel like you can't cope with whatever's going through. And it could be the smallest thing that becomes very overwhelming.
So what are the symptoms? What shows you that you have a mental illness or disorder and you actually need to go seek help?
So I understand the question. I prefer not to look at it as, oh, I need to self-diagnose that I have a mental illness. But I feel it's more,
being aware of
yeah, I think it's more aware of your own mental state. So if you're not okay, and you're not okay for a long while, this can be seen in signs like you're having trouble sleeping, you're having trouble, you're constantly in loops in your mind and thinking about things and overanalyzing things. You can't relax. You're always thinking that you need to sort of like be productive in some way. Or the opposite, where you are just so tired, both mentally and physically, that you're not able to keep up with your day-to-day responsibilities.
So this is not a physical symptom?
It's not
it can show up.
It can show up in your physical body in the sense that you are drained of energy, and you're also in the sense that you can't sleep. Sleep is the number one thing for me, the sign. It is essential for you to be able to really sort of like stay with your life, because your body's literally rejuvenating itself, and your cells are reproducing as you sleep.
But when it comes to mental illness, sometimes it's not enough to just sleep it off.
It's not enough. So I think when you know, everybody knows when they're not okay. They really do. Then it's a question of figuring out, do I actually need support now?
So could we mention a few, what should I say, a few, not diagnoses, but a few symptoms or a few mental illnesses that people know that are normal in society, like anxiety, and then there's other extreme cases.
Yeah, and I would say they're not, it's just a clinical diagnosis as opposed to it being an extreme thing, but it's a clinical diagnosis. So those could be things like schizophrenia or bipolar, or any of those could be. But that is, you have gone to a doctor and they've actually assessed, you've had a psychologist, and they've come to the conclusion that that is what is the thing that you're grappling with. That's the challenge that you have. Yeah.
So treatment.
Yeah.
What is the treatment?
So I would say, I don't really want to go into what the treatments are because they're going to be different for different people. But what I would say is that the best way to get a treatment is to get support and help. Yeah.
So, well, obviously as a nurse, I'm used to giving people pills for their diseases, but when it comes to mental illness, that's not unless it's a clinical diagnosis, like you said, a depression
Yeah,
or
you might,
schizophrenia.
yeah.
But some of them just basically need therapy.
I think that it depends on what the diagnosis is or what your doctor has told you. For some, it's enough to just have a regimen in terms of your day-to-day routine and exercise and eat better. For others, it's going to be a completely different plan. And the most important thing here is to make sure that you do have one of how you're going to move forward. So for example, for some, it is about pills. Perhaps you need that in order to function, but you should never just have one part of your plan, right? So it's not just popping pills and then that's it, you're gonna get there. You still have to mind your body, you still have to also look at how you can get help with therapy to talk through whatever it might be. You may have gone through a trauma that needs to be addressed in some way.
So Suma Haven,
Yeah.
what do you guys do?
So yeah, so it's a little bit more like what I said in the beginning. It's more us connecting with people, with therapists and psychologists who understand the cultural context in which you come from. So it helps really to create safety. So I don't believe that healing can really happen unless you feel safe enough to be able to feel safe enough to say exactly what's on your mind and what's happening to you. That safety needs to be there in order for you to be able to assess it thoroughly together with your therapist.
And you said earlier that you need a therapist that speaks your language. You don't need the actual language,
Could
English,
be.
Swedish.
It could be. It could be English. We do mostly English, Swedish, but we also do other languages because all of our therapists have a different background. So.
But it could also be the silent language where you understand each other from a
Yeah,
cultural perspective.
absolutely, absolutely.
So what's the difference between Suma Haven and well, except for the culture, basically the traditional therapy that we're used to?
Yeah. So all of our therapists are trained in the traditional therapy. So they do CBT, they do ACT, those different sort of modalities, they use those. The main difference is really what I said, like, and nobody on that platform shouldn't have an aspect of anti-racist and decolonial perspective. And to my knowledge, there isn't an organization that works in that way at this point in time.
So Suma Haven is very new and different in that way.
Yes, because we're intentional about making sure that people feel safe when they come to us. It's already a huge work to get to us, to actually acknowledge to yourself that you need help. That's one, and then two, actually taking that step to actually reach out to someone. That's an enormous amount of courage and energy that goes into that process. And so when they come to us, we want to make sure that they feel safe being with us, right?
So a last reflection, I talked to you earlier.
Yeah.
I have spoken about Suma Haven and I talk about therapy all the time to my friends.
Yeah.
I basically say we all need therapy at some point. And I have a wonderful therapist.
Yeah.
So what the ladies I spoke to yesterday evening, we talked about the pricing.
Yeah.
They know that they need therapy.
Yeah.
They feel as though it's too expensive.
Yeah.
What can we do to mobilize therapy being affordable?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question because it's a real concern for a lot of people, the amount of, especially if you're going private. I think the first thing is, if you cannot go private, the best way is to go down the route of your doctor and have them do a referral for you to see someone. And that would be paid through the normal sort of care system. If you are in a position where you can pay privately, then it's a question of looking at how do they pay, right? So some of the therapists might have packages where you can pay a little bit at a time. Some of them have what's called sliding scale. So they will look at your economical background and then put a price that works for you. We personally, as an organization, we're trying to find ways to business model that works so that you can drive the price down a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's also very important to think about the mindset shift we also have to make on how we value therapy, right? Because a lot of us see that that is like a last resort that we tend to, but it can also be used as a preemptive note, which means that you're not going to be in that seat for very long. And also you'll gain the tools to be able to take care of yourself in a different way. So you don't have to go to therapy. And so for us, we're looking into having maybe group therapy sessions and different informational things, pretty much like this, where we're just like educating people on how to take care of themselves from a mental perspective.
Prioritizing the mental.
Yeah, and really prioritizing your mental well-being. If there's anything I would want the audience here to take with them is to prioritize this and to learn when you're not feeling off. You know when you're not feeling off as a person. Nobody else can tell you that, right? So it's really, really important to listen to those signals because we are great at ignoring those signals and just rushing through our days. So it's really important that we really listen to that. And like, if I need to take a day off, I'm taking a day off. If I can afford it. If I can't afford it, what is the next best thing I can do for myself in order to take care of myself in that moment? Yeah.
And we talked about burnout.
Yeah.
That was very...
Yeah,
something that you experienced.
personal experience, yeah.
And that is part of a mental illness.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, just not being able to get out of bed and being able to do your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's the most common and most prevalent mental, I would say, not well-being or challenge that most people face today is burnout. And that could be from being a student and having way too many exams to like having pressures at work, or even feeling that you're in a toxic environment at work and discovering a lot of different things, right? And that's impacting your well-being. So with all of those things, it's always good to look at the root cause and also look at what can I influence in the moment. So what is within my control and what is outside of my control. Focus on what's within your control. So if you're in a toxic environment, is it within your control to look for a different job or not? Right? Just an example.
Yes. So before I personally went to therapy, I had my tools that I use to feel better about myself, to basically unwind and basically prioritize my mental health. And that was through prayer, journaling, and exercise. So when that is not enough, because you talked about this on Sumahagen, and you talked about religion, because a lot of us in the community use religion as a fallback. Does one outdo the other?
So, and this is my personal conviction because I'm also a Muslim and very much someone who is religious. So I would say this, that the two don't cancel each other out. You can do both because they operate in different ways, right? So for me, speaking to my higher person, right, is my way of communicating what's in my heart. But therapy is a way to address it from a logical perspective and getting the tools to help myself.
Another
Right?
angle, basically.
So it's a different angle. And I think that there are certain, at least in my sort of circle of like community, there's this notion or thought that if I am doing therapy, then I don't believe enough in my Savior or in my higher person, because that means that I'm doubting what He's got for me, or what, right? And I think that that is a little bit, those are thoughts that could be validated in some way, but I think that it can also be really harmful to yourself from that perspective. So it's important to separate the two so that you can allow yourself to get the support you need.
Because we're built up in different areas, mind, body, and spirit.
Yes, and I think that all three need to be addressed. address?
All right, so I do believe we'll have a few minutes for questions. I saw someone with a hand in the air. Do you want to say something? Take a question.
The question was like, I heard you say like you have to recognize the singers.
You have to what?
Recognize the singers. The singers.
Yeah.
I mean, when those singers come, they also like fear. Like, I mean, when they're singers, but we don't want to take that step like, there's come and stop you
From taking the actual.
So how do you actually overcome? Once you recognize the singer, and you also have to
That is an amazing question.
hear that singer also has this thing.
Amazing question. I don't know if everyone got the question, but how do you overcome the fear of actually dealing with the signs that you see, right? And I think the way to address it is to be honest with yourself and figure out where is that fear coming from. What is the root cause of that fear? Is it what other people are going to say if they find out? Is it that, you don't know what's on the other end of you healing? Whatever the fear is, look at that and then ask yourself, is that really true?
But what is that fear from yourself?
So for me, there was no fear to go and look for help. And the reason why it wasn't is because I live in a family where it's allowing. But I also am very aware that there are many families out there where it is not allowing. You are supposed to be strong all the time. And you're not supposed to show weakness in any way, shape, or form, right? So it's all about the culture that we live in and how that impacts how we think about this, right? So if you feel the fear, figure out where that's coming from. If it is, if I address this or talk about it, then maybe if it's my family and how they're going to react to it, then don't talk to your family about it and go and seek the help. Because the people that you're talking to, they're under confidentiality clauses. So for example, all our therapists, if you speak to them, nobody's going to know that you're speaking to someone. And you can address it for yourself, right?
I think
And then you can maybe tell your family afterwards. Because you still want to keep that honesty with them.
I think mainly talk to yourself if you're okay hearing that story. Because for me, I've been through, there's a time where I wasn't comfortable talking about my brother's addiction because I felt it was shame to my family. But we were falling, all of us, because of his addiction. And today I'm not afraid to say that my brother's a drug addict, he's an alcoholic, and it's shameful for the family, but it's not anymore because when we actually talk about it, then it came from a mental illness which he numbed with alcohol and drugs, and then it hurt our whole family. So today when I talk about it, it affected me very, very much. But now, when I'm okay talking about it, it's not shameful because I know other families are going through much more than I can comprehend. And it's not okay to just push it under the rug. Just talk to yourself. Are you okay? Because then that puts me back to the girl that wrote about the book, Ebonita. She talks about how she was molested as a child. She put that in a 200 page book with the graphics of how she was raped as a child. But it came from her. She was okay to talk to herself about what happened to her, and now the world can read about it. So I think you have to start with yourself. Are you okay hearing your story, telling your story to yourself?
Yeah, and I think I just want to close that out by saying any fear that you have, regardless of what fear it is, maybe if it's in this context or a different context, it loses power over you the minute you start to actually address it. It loses power over you, and it will diminish over time. It appear to be real, but it's not. It's in your head.
It limits you.
So it limits you on purpose.
Anybody else have a question?
More like a point of clarification, you had said that you guys give decolonialized and anti-racist therapy. Could you elaborate on what those two words actually mean in the context of the therapy setting?
Yeah, so the context is that we have with regards to therapy and other different roles as well, so social services. They're an American organization, but they train people in people-facing roles. Right. So what we're doing right now is we're adopting the training that they have given us into an onboarding training that we do for our therapists and psychologists who come into our platform. And what that contains is cultural safety. So cultural safety is actually based on a concept that was made by someone called Indra Hepeti Ramsden from New Zealand. So that it's a 5 principle, and that contains the perspective of looking at yourself from a position of power, the perspective of looking at yourself and knowing the history of decolonialism, what that means, and also anti-racism, the history of it, where did it come from, right, and why was it there? So it's more understanding all of those aspects and then being able to apply that in your position, because it's increasing your awareness as your own therapist, you as a therapist, and your own biases, because we all have them, right? So it's about understanding that and being able to separate that from the way that you show up with your client in your position. So that's how we do it.
And just to sum up, because as you can realize, we are in a different culture than we were born into. So to say, we're in Europe, and usually my first therapist that I got through work, going through issues with my brother, he didn't understand that, why I had to take care of my big brother to help him through his addiction. So I guess that is what we're trying, Superheaven is trying to work with. Someone who actually understands your culture, your background, and what you build up. You're not just one thing, you're different things. We come from group settings. We're kind of a family, while here it's an individual society. So that person that you go to seek help with your mental illness has to understand this, that you're not that one individual, but you have a whole group.
Alright, and while we're on the theme of decolonialism in this particular context, I don't know, you guys would probably be better experts on this, but historically speaking, within like African cultures as a whole, historically speaking, within like African cultures as a whole, they're very diverse. Was there a particular kind of system to address these types of challenges even in the pre-colonial era? Is there any specific culture you could point to per se and say, well, they had this system where ex-elders would be able to address the issues of members of the community and so forth? And if that exists, are you taking any elements of that particular system and applying it now to people who it may relate to?
So I don't actually know whether there was a particular system from a particular African country, but if you look at the way that we live generally, in most African countries, we've always had our ancestors, our history, and our history has always been told to us through word of mouth. And that has then been the anchor for our grandparents to tell us and give us advice and wisdom from that perspective. So whenever we had a problem, our most natural person to go to were our grandparents. Today, it's like your uncle's coming at your house and talking to you if you have a marriage problem. It's your aunties. And that is like literally what we've inherited from that perspective. So now, if we come back to the individualistic perspective of doing this, because let's be honest, like therapy is a Western leap.
And that's why I was asking.
So it is a Western leap,
yeah.
Right? So the way that we're doing it now is we're looking at how can we take some of the Western way of doing it and then applying it to our context. And I'm going to be honest with you, we're just on our journey to discovering all of this. So we're talking to, there's a lady called Michelle Souden, who's amazing, and she's done a lot of research on, just indigenous And so we're looking at studying all the different modalities and trying to bring that back and then seeing how can we put that together with the Western ways of doing things. So that's our journey right now. But we are just at the beginning of this journey. So it's more westernized than what it is in general, right? But
And there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, but the first step is knowledge. And so what we're doing is we're filling our therapists with knowledge. Because even though, for me personally, even though I'm born and raised here, but I have African parents, I was raised like any other African kid from that perspective. But I still lack knowledge about my history. And so with that, I have to go out there and search that first in order to provide a service that would really help other people. Yeah.
All right, so we've gone over time. That's okay. I feel this was insightful. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna wrap up. Thank you so much for listening in. Jabofun at Suma Heaven. You have Instagram.
Yes, we're Suma Haven, S-U-M-A Haven, H-A-V-E-N.
And you're still
we're
around?
on Instagram. I'm still around,
If
yeah.
anybody wants to talk therapy to you, they can
All right.
come to you so you can tell them more. And I am Aisha, Nurse Aisha, on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. You can find me there. All right, thank you so much. We'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Just a few. Awesome. Många nya ansikten ser jag. Vad trevligt. Välkomna allihopa. We're going to move on to the next point of the program. And as I mentioned, we have a rigorous program today. But first and foremost, just pointing out that Civil Paint is going to be starting pretty soon. There are a few of you that have registered, but if you are interested in painting and so forth, you're welcome to register. You can do that by the entrance. Yeah, so basically head that way. Otherwise, you have the artist himself, Bruce Karim, by the way, standing right behind me. So turn around and see him, he's there. And moreover, you've probably seen a lot of art around us. Behind me, for instance, on the wall over there, this is the art of Bruce. So yeah, if you want to paint with Bruce, learn some tricks, take the opportunity now. Before that, we do have something happening on this stage. Awesome, and they seem to be ready. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce the next point, which is a fashion show mix of Bri from Tunisia, and that's a Tunisian designer who happens to not be here today, unfortunately. However, we have a representative who will tell you a little bit more about her, her designs, and yeah, how we're showing her stuff. And with that, there's also Afri-Colors collection, showing you a couple of male jackets today. So newest on fashion, latest trends, and Afri-Colors collection is actually here today. So if you want to go afterwards and talk to them and check out what kind of things they have, just behind over with the market, and you will find that for that. And also you will find, of course, a lot of other options in the market. So don't be shy, go and check it out. With no further ado, and enough of my voice, right? Let's let the models do their thing. Ladies. The collection that you have just seen is inspired by North African or indigenous North African clothing. A lot of the clothes you have seen are both for men and women. They are unisex because in North Africa both men and women wear dresses, and that's something we're very much accustomed to. I do have a presentation on every single one of the designs and the patterns. I actually created it here. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show it on the screen behind me, but if you do have any questions, I will be right there to answer any questions on the patterns that you have seen on our clothing. The brand is called Bribri if you want to follow on Instagram, and I also have the QR code and everything if you would like to order. The brand supports women in Tunisia, and the woman who created all of this is called Mariam Bribri, and she's a very, very cool person. This is also one of her last designs. This is actually a carpet, and it's called Margou in Amazigh. And the issue is from Cameroon. I hope you enjoyed it. Now we're going to welcome some designs from Nigeria. If the models are ready, we can start with the Nigerian clothes from Afro Colors. Models.
very much, everybody. My name is Mercy Saikis, and I'm from Nigeria. And yeah, this is Afrocolors. And Afrocolors is a brand that promotes African textiles as well. And it's also promotes the modern wear. And all the textiles use 100% cotton. And I and my partners from Nigeria work together to make this lovely and calm collection together. And it's something you can wear anywhere, even to the office. You can wear with your jacket, you can wear with your skirt. You can see how she represents it. And yeah, so it's all talk about colors and the way color can rhyme with any other colors. Yes, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you appreciating my brand. Thank you very much. Lastly, my stand is at the back of Backup Lake, Backup View. So you can feel free to visit my stand, and I'm also having a discount as well for today. So feel free to visit my stand. Another thing is that I also sell on Etsy, so you can go on Etsy, you can view my brand as well on Etsy. Thank you. And we have other brands here, not only my brand, so also feel free to visit other brands to see what they have, lovely things they have. Thank you.
They say we carry 7 generations in our bones. But what about the ones we've only known through dreams and tones? The ones we've never seen but feel near. You know when their voice is faint but their presence is clear. What about the ones whose laughter we inherited but never heard? I know my grandfather, he was a shoemaker, hands like tools, a quiet creator. He stitched each soul like a whispered prayer. My grandmother, she was soft but strong, a housewife who had the storm all along. She kept the fire lit, the water boiled, kept warmth alive when the world recoiled. My grandparents were farmers. They raised the earth with every stripe. I come from soil, from sweat, from strain, from sun-split palms and dancing rain, from stories carved in callous skin that even the floods couldn't wash within. I think about them a lot, more than I admit, and one day, I will press my forehead to their graves. Your story did not end with you. Its roots still grows in all I do. 7 generations behind, and none of them had the luxury to dream like me, to speak so freely. I don't know all their names, but they know mine. I feel them when I fall and rise at the same time. 7 behind me, 7 ahead. I stand in the middle, fed by the dead, facing the unborn and still unsure what to do with all these breaths. Ancestors, did I honor you today? Do I carry your legacy? Do I live authentically? My heritage is no performance. I want to plant something real. I mean real, of real importance. I wonder what they would say. Would they say, we walked so you could run, or we built so you could become? I ask because I'm asking myself too, but there's a question I want you to think through. If you could meet your ancestors, would they be proud of you? Thank you.
Production of Vladimir Farren and just go mad if you like that. But before that, we do have some other things on the program. So everybody please welcome in. And I hope you're ready. I'm gonna introduce the next speaker. All the way from Congo and Sweden. This man is doing amazing stuff. I do have to say we have a wonderful lineup of amazing people today, and I'm very, very happy to present Mr. Bantala, founder of Ungdomarna Först. He's a mentor, an activist, and a human rights defender. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself, what he does at Ungdomarna Först, and then what you're going to do today. Right?
Okay.
Welcome.
Hey. Hey. Can you be some challenge? Some love. We are coming from Africa. Africa is rice. That's sound. So we need to show some love. Hey. My name is Montala. I come from Congo. I'm a poet. Ungdomarna Först founder. Ungdomarna Först is a youth organization that is here in Sweden. We help young people with integration, with building, with entrepreneurial scope. We used to do, we have like a compound that we are doing is like learn how to say no. Learn how to say no to criminality, learn how to say no to drugs, all those things. So that's what we are doing. But today, I come here like a poet because I'm a member in the Congo Moko, and I'm an activist. I do my activism in poetry. I was talking about what's happening in Congo because now, a war in the Congo in like almost 30 years is happening a lot. Today, all of us, we have phones, we have computer with us, so that mineral that is making those phones come from Congo. But there they are using child that is working there, and it's very horrible. So I choose my voice to talk about what's happening in Congo because enough is enough. So today I'm going to raise some poetry. One should be Swedish, and another one will be French and English. So I will try to mix some languages in my poetry. So hope you will like it. So give me some love, give me some love, give me some love. Can I try your microphone for the sound? So, hello, Regnet faller for alle og så den kvinne for den som helst. Åpna ditt hjerte, og la kjærligheten være til deg. La til desperat kokaska, lika negativa tanker som kommer oss, hjertet er steg for steg. Gloomy that stovel andom deg, då andom deg som man var snabbt ord. Varje stund en räknas, varje sekund är väldigt viktig. Åpna ditt hjärta, och la kärleken vara till dig. Skottar på majoriteten. Låt huskar som regnet smälter, som smälter, vinden slår, som smälter efter regnet har passerat. Regnet kommer och står jag på sina tårar. Åpna ditt hjärta och låt kärleken kontrollera dig. Kärleken finns i ditt gatsblick, kärleken finns i ditt skolblick, kärleken finns i ditt barn på lämnar varje morgon i skolan. Kärleken finns här, kärleken finns på jobbet, kärleken finns på tåget, kärleken finns i skogen, kärleken finns i broborgen. Öppna ditt hjärta, fånga kraften i dina händer. Tänd en ljus av kärlek pourquoi on se bat au pays tel que ça. Ça crie à l'aide au Congo, comme celle de tous ces voix qui soignent sa propre voix. Congo dans mon cœur, Congo dans mon âme. Congolais qui pleure pour sa mère patrie qui s'enflamme. La mort est là, je vois à Lady. L'amour est là, moi je vois à voilà les cris de détresse qui se lancent, mais le monde devient sourd. Les cris de misère qui se lancent, mais le monde devient aveugle. La mort est là, je vois à Lady. L'amour est là, moi je vois à à chaque battement du cœur, les coteaux s'en va. À chaque smartphone, côté, les gouttelettes de sang, les Congolais innocents. À chaque pas, le peuple vit dans l'horreur. À chaque fois, le soleil s'éloigne dans l'horreur. À chaque gamin, posé sur les joues d'un gamin sans espoir. À côté de la fusée, par les amis de la République. Qu'est-ce qui se passe au Congo? What is happening in Congo? I want to be honest. Babe, I'm from where peace is just a dream. Where death embraces life. Where expressing ourselves is a crime. Babe, I come from where human rights is not respect. I know, for no reason they are killing child. You know, some they're killing women. And no one know why they prefer to fight if they can make peace. No one know why they prefer to fight if they can make peace. Our voices are shaking. Life is killing our story, our blessing, our resources stolen, but it can't kill our spirits, it can't replace our spirits. We have just our voice to say, stop the genocide, free Congo, stop the genocide. We set fire, they put us, we set fire, they're killing us. What is happening in Congo? Ils ont fermé nos bouches pour ne rien dire, mais par nous-mêmes pour écrire. Nos voir comme des voix et dès qu'ils font semblant qu'il n'est pas seul de prison, les frontières du Congo et semblant. Au béclatant pour les bons présents, les plus violents dans la paix, pour bâtir notre pays plus beau comme Congo dans mon cœur, Congo dans mon âme, Congolais qui pleure, pour sa mère patrie qui s'enflamme. L'amour est là, je le vois aller. L'amour est là, je le vois aller. Can you save me, free Congo? Can you save me, free Congo? Free Congo! Can you save me, free Congo? Free Congo! Can you save me, free Congo? Free Congo! Free Congo, stop the genocide. We need peace in our country. We need peace in the world. We need peace in Palestine. We need peace in Gaza. We need peace in Congo. We need all of us to live together because together is a beautiful world. Together is a powerful world. Together, I don't see a race, don't see the color, don't see any religion, I don't see any sex. So thank you, take care. Thank you.
I hope you're ready for it. It's a very interesting talk, and it's a talk I would say kind of has the essence of Color of Africa and what the festival is about, really. And it's about, looking at platforms where people of color have the opportunity of creating our own stories, creating our own narrative, showing what we do, who we are, where we're going, and talking about all these things. Way too many times we have other people telling the stories for us, but we have our own ways of telling our stories. We have just not been having the platforms to do so. And so now we're looking forward to seeing how do we create these platforms, why are these platforms important for us, and has the right to tell the stories, really. And for this fantastic discussion, we have two amazing people who are going to lead it for us. And one of them is Ivan. And with Ivan, we have an amazing young man, a scholar in African art history. And I'm going to let him introduce himself because I can never do him justice with the resume that he has. Max Delanium Jacobson.
Hi, Max. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. It is a pleasure to be here. I guess I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Max Delanium Jacobson. I am a Swedish-Ghanaian art historian and curator. What does that mean? That means I have studied and specialized in the history of art coming out of Africa and created by African artists. I then work with galleries, museums, and other types of platforms to bring that work to the world. And because one of my specialties within art history is textiles, that has also allowed me to work a lot with fashion designers, and so I've worked in New York Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week with various designers to present there. And I'm excited to have this conversation and to get to know all of you guys and answer your questions.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be an interesting conversation for myself as well. I think the work that you do is really deep. When I read your biography, I was quite touched by how many different spaces you were covering. So we'll try and get into that and try and give the people a bit more depth into you and see if we can answer some of their questions as well. So just starting off, I think one of the questions that at least I have nowadays, especially with how the world is changing with a lot of technology, a lot of different initiatives happening and different spaces being made available and unavailable to our culture. What do you think is what do you think is the easiest way to kind of navigate between where to place your sense of communication? So a lot of people communicate in social media, and that's like a really big thing. But is that the best? We don't maybe communicate as much physically in person and have conversations. There may be debates that happen that are like viral, and people take a lot from that. But I think those conversations that happen in the physical space are a lot more often safe, and people take more from it. So what are your thoughts on those types of conversation and communication in digital versus physical spaces?
Thank you so much for that question. I think we often separate between the digital and the physical, as if they are realms that don't interact and that are fundamentally work in different ways. But the truth is, I think, what we can think more about is how these two realms can conspire together to actually enact change. One of the conversation points that has emerged from this talk today is about how, what we can do as people based in Sweden or Stockholm about issues that are occurring elsewhere, about communities that matter to us in a different context. And the digital, world allows us to bridge that gap in really important ways, educational ways, reach, making things accessible. But what I also notice is that it allows us to be complacent, thinking that what we do on the digital landscape is enough. And so in my specialty, which is art, there is nothing better than what we can experience in the physical world. I mean, it's the same thing about listening to a song in your headphones versus going to a concert. It's going to seeing an artwork on Instagram versus seeing it in a physical space. You see these beautiful prints and paintings up on these walls would look very different if you just engage with them on your phone. And so I think we need to, and this is quite obvious, think about how we can activate the digital space to bring people into physical spaces like we're doing today. You know, in many ways, the fact that I am here was because you found me digitally, and now I'm physically here. And so I think that is an example of how we can make the bridge between those two worlds happen better.
Yeah, I think that's, I agree 100%. I think an interesting kind of segue with that question of physical versus digital, and also understanding that the life that a lot of people live and where they put their focus and their time is digitally nowadays, especially with the younger generation. We still find ourselves with the need to preserve, to teach, to conserve our culture. How do we do that nowadays, where so many people are alive digitally, but aren't so open to things like this? How do we kind of bridge that gap, especially with the younger generation, where physically we might have been able to, you know, have house parties or gatherings at our parents' or cousins' place and, you know, teach and like have traditionally passed down in that way. We maybe aren't able to do that as much nowadays. Do you see any space there to kind of find a way through that?
I think if you begin with so you keep it constant and you understand that we are in a violently global society where, I mean, if you look at the conversations that we're having today, we're having a conversation in Stockholm about Africa in English, you know, and where I speak with a horrible American accent, even though I'm not American, you know. We think about the ways in which we are raised now in an intensely global society, and we're going to have to compete on that global level. And so when I think about African art and culture, I think about it as something that we now need to understand as existing in the global arena, and it being compared and contrasted and, like I said, competing in those spaces. And that, I think, allows us to then think more deeply about how we can innovate to be at that stage. When we think about music, I bring it up again, even though it's not my specialty, we're experiencing African music being played all around the world. Why is that happening? Because they've had to sort of bridge that gap and bring and merge some of our intensely fantastic skills that we have had on the continent for decades, you know, bring that into the global stage, present that to the world, and show, look what we've been doing this entire time, it's fantastic, and now you get to experience it. And I think the same thing with, and that is how I see the younger generation and how you bring them in. I think by trying to tell the younger generation constantly about, look at these great things we had in the past. You should be interested about these old things that are really old and beautiful. I'm not sure that always is going to work. It worked on me, I'm an art historian, but it's not going to work on our younger kids. And so we need to think about how we bring those beautiful old traditions, bring them to the present, maybe innovate a little bit on them, and make them quote unquote cool again for the young generation.
Yeah. Be careful. Thank you. So, kind of on that subject as well, I think events like this have been put on, thankfully, through the help of Stockholm Stad, and I think it's a work that goes on, and a lot of people have to put in a lot of effort to make something like this happen. And we're really thankful and grateful for that. But of course, we do see there is a need for the processes to be maybe a bit simpler to make something like this happen, because I think everyone can agree that this is needed more. So there's a responsibility that lies somewhere. And there are government associations, there are cultural organizations. How do we tell them that this is something that needs to happen more and needs to happen in a way that isn't, it needs to be made easier? So how do we communicate that need?
That's a really great question, and I think in order to answer that question, I actually have to step out from sort of the conversation about Sweden in particular, because for context, I do not live in Sweden. I am originally from Sweden on my dad's side. I lived here until 2017, and then my family left. We went to France, and then the entire family, after 2 years in France, returned to Africa. And ever since, they've been living in Senegal. And I myself have been based mostly in Guinea, which is where my mom is from. And I think a place like Dakar, if anyone here has had the opportunity to be there, is a fantastic, beautiful city that has a lot of energy, especially when it comes to culture. Lots of events constantly, lots of galleries, festivals, concerts. Many of them are funded by diplomatic bodies that live in Dakar. So the French embassy, the Italian embassy, the German, the EU. It means that when you're in Dakar and you're experiencing the beauty of that city, how enlivened African culture feels there, you're also seeing at the bottom all the sponsors of those events, and you realize that that support comes with requirements. It always comes with strings attached, and it also is not sustainable. You know, because one day the French embassy can choose, oh, well, we're not that interested in funding your little festival anymore. We're going to pull out that funding. And suddenly, it's something that you have been working on in this country, in Dakar in that case, in Senegal, falls through and disappears. That has taught me, and I think teaches all of us, that relying on sponsorships from government bodies is never sustainable. I believe that they have a duty to fund a lot of these initiatives, because if you think about these Western countries and the wealth they've accumulated and that they have today, so much of that wealth was built off of exploiting our geographies and our people. So yes, they have a duty, but that duty, I don't know how long that is going to last, that feeling of indebtedness, like them feeling indebted or feeling like they owe us this money. That's not going to last. And so thinking about places like this, the work that I do in culture, I'm always thinking about, well, we need to build our own companies, we need to build our own institutions that themselves can sustain, and they can get, you know, that extra help along the way to jumpstart, to expand, but we need to have our own sustainable sort of paths forward. And how do we do that? There are many ways. You know, you can think about it as being a commercial venture. You know, if it is a commercial venture, how does that allow it to then sustain itself? You can think about it being funded by our own people. How does that happen? You know, with a lot of the work that I do physically on the African continent, which is where I'm based full time, one of the big things we're facing is, well, how do we get all these wealthy Africans who have so much money to stop sending their money to Switzerland and instead investing their money back into their own countries? So there's small things like that that we're, I think, challenges that we're not, to be honest, facing head on as much as we should, because we are allowed to kind of rely on these interim funding bodies, but that are going to be an issue in the long term, because that's not sustainable. So I can't answer specifically for Stockholm and Sweden, but I think there may be some similarities.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some translatable concepts there, so I think that's really good. I think I want to focus a bit more on you and your journey. You mentioned about spending time in France and now being based in Guinea, and specifically your academic background when it comes to history. How do you feel like that has informed your intentions in your work now? Because I think a lot of people can, for example, go to museums like the Ethnological Museum here, take part in history, but it's kind of, okay, that's how it was, and that's it, oh, this is really brilliant, that's it. How do we take more from that in music for intentions and initiatives now?
Thank you so much for that question. I'm very happy to share a little bit about myself, and if you have any questions at the end, I'm happy to answer them. So my sort of weird, convoluted story is that I grew up a little bit here in Sweden, went back and forth to Guinea and Senegal when I was younger with my family, did high school in France, and then I ended up moving to America for college. And I went to a small school named Princeton, and I arrived at that school and I was astounded by how many Africans there were there. You know, that's not often an understanding we have of these, you know, famous elite institutions. I thought that I would be going there and I would have to, like, you know, eat very sad food for 4 years and not have a, you know, fun, lively time. And then I arrived there and, you know, we had a really strong, bold, united African community at that university. However, and this is not necessarily a negative, but this is something I experienced, all the Africans that I met, we were studying engineering, pre-med, or finance. There was not a single African who was invested in arts or culture. That's not because they don't engage or want to, it's because of financial reasons. You know, you have worked really hard to get into a good school and you have family pressure to sustain and support your own family. You're going to take a path that is very stable. This is a good career. What that meant is, you know, I've always been interested in history and art, and I arrived there. I began taking courses in the history department at Princeton and the art history department. They have a really strong sort of reputation for their work on African history. But of course, there's not a single African professor who teaches African history at Princeton. And also, there was no other African or even Black student in those entire departments. So I was the only one the entire time. There was one professor, and if there's anyone you need to look up, of course all these incredible speakers, but if there's someone else you need to look up when you go home tonight, his name is Chika Okeke Agulu. He's a Nigerian art historian based at that university. And he literally changed my entire life when I saw him. Because here was this man who had studied at the University of Ibadan and at the University of Nsukka in Nigeria, worked his way up, becoming a professor in art history, focusing not just on Nigerian art. He's now teaching at Princeton, and he told me this one simple thing when I met him, which is that Africa is not lacking in terms of talent and culture. You know, when it comes to his specialty, which is art, Nigeria is full of talented painters, sculptors, artisans. What they are lacking, however, are people who are able to defend, explain, and promote that culture. You know, when it comes to art history, you can look at a fantastic painting and everyone can have their own opinions about it. But sometimes it helps if there's someone who knows a little bit about art who can say, this is really good and this is why, and give you reasons for it. And he argued, Chika, that that is one of the many things that we're missing in Africa today, and that is what he devoted his entire life to. Because if we do not write or explain or research or document our own histories, our own art, other people will do it for you, and they'll profit off of it, and they'll take whatever is most precious from it and adapt it into their own work. And so that is what completely derailed my plan, when I was meeting him. And ever since, I've been in positions where we are experiencing, especially in this day and age, a shift where 20, 30 years ago, a lot of the conversation when it came to African art, African culture, was that, oh, well, there aren't any experts to talk about this. Or when it came to repatriation of artifacts, it was, oh, well, there are no museums in Africa we can send the works back to. Was what they would say here in Europe. That argument in the next 5 to 10 years, or already in the last 5 to 10 years, is falling apart. Because we now have and have had, or the experts are now getting recognition for the incredible scholarship that they've been doing. And we have a new generation of scholars emerging where those arguments are not going to work anymore. And that art is going to have to return to Africa. Conversations about African art is going to have, these conversations are going to be had by experts about African art. And so I'm excited to see that changing. And that's what I contribute to.
Amazing. I think, again, as I said when I read your bio, I think it's super important work that you're doing, so thank you for that. I think you mentioned something important, which we see unfortunately quite often, which is people, for better or for worse, taking and representing African culture in the way that they see it. How can we talk to our native Swedes, native Europeans, about that type of representation and what is important to think about? There's words that I think of when talking about this, like gatekeeping and cultural appropriation, and I think a lot of that kind of stuff can be stigmatized. When I think it's more about creating an understanding. I think a lot of the time intentions can be quite good, but things done in the wrong way without the right knowledge can come out on the other side not looking so good. So how do we actually teach and give that information so that people actually do end up in the right space at the end of it?
I think when it comes to that example of constantly having to educate or correct other people, my personal stance on this, which may not be the most popular stance, is that it is not my job to constantly educate you to try to fix your ways. Because I think that is a vicious and insidious game that has been made that actually wastes our own energy and time. For decades, this is not a new conversation, for decades, African peoples, African scholars, writers, thinkers have been outlining how we should, the words we should use when talking about our people, the ways we should address one another with respect. And those books are out there. Those articles, those videos, like this discourse has occurred. And so I cannot waste my time constantly repeating that to the masses. I'd rather focus on my own work, my own innovation. And you're going to have to adapt your language to what I'm doing. And I think, to be very honest, in certain spaces we're seeing that happen. In the spaces that I specifically work in, which I understand is not the global, the mass population, but within the art world, within the fashion spaces, creatives, African creatives have put their foot down and said, this is how you address my work, this is the language around my work, and this is how you should perceive it. If you don't want to adapt to my language, that's your problem, and then you're going to fall behind. And so my stance is, it's not my job to keep educating these people. I'm just going to focus on perfecting my own work.
Totally understandable, and I think it's great being honest with that stuff. Messi, did you want to? Oh, we can speak. So we can just speak a bit closer to the microphone, then I think we'll be good. Cool, great. Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I think something I've struggled with personally is since I moved here, I've been living in Stockholm or Sweden for 10 years. One thing I struggled with is making sure, or feeling the need to make sure that my culture is accessible. And me coming from London, born and raised, but having parents from Uganda, I have a couple of different cultures. And yeah, it's kind of like an ongoing struggle to understand, okay, well, I mean, these people seem nice, they want to partake. How do I navigate that space? And kind of fall between two sides. And I think that's like allowing for that is good. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask the question, because I think it's great to hear from someone like you, your opinion and what is the best way to do it. So thank you for sharing that. I think we're going to go for another couple of minutes. And maybe we can actually pass it on to the audience if anyone has any questions in the audience for Max. We can speak in a couple of minutes. Yes? Welcome to you.
You can just be close to me.
Hi, can you hear me now? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what themes you're interested in your own work right now, and maybe where you have a missed it. But yeah, I'd love to hear what interests you, what you would like to watch at the moment.
Thank you so much for that question. I realized I actually didn't give a lot of specific examples of the work that I do, so thank you for giving me that opportunity. So like I said, I'm an arts curator. That means that it can mean a lot of things, but it means that I'm the one usually leading a curatorial project on an exhibition. If it's about selecting works that are presented, I or my team are the ones choosing who is invited to show their work. Or if I'm working with a collection of works, I'm the one, pointing out this is what I want to show and why. And importantly, I'm also then the person who bridges and explains why that selection was made. And so that comes with a lot of responsibility, which is why it is work that is usually done by researchers, because you are expected to take the time to really become an expert on the thing you are then presenting about. It would be unfathomable for me to do an exhibition about a subject that I have not spent, years studying to make sure that I do this correctly. And one of the themes that I've been pursuing for the last few years is the theme of materiality, which many art historians and artists are making an argument for is a pattern that has been taken, or a movement in the art world that has been taken away from Africans, when in reality it's something that is deeply embedded in the African artistic tradition. So what is materiality? It is artists who are choosing not to disregard the material that they are working with in their work. That is to say that when they paint on a canvas, or when they paint on a surface, that surface is key to the work itself. And so for instance, I am currently preparing a show that's going to open in Johannesburg in February, where some of the artworks that are presented in that show are African artists who have chosen to paint on newspapers. And so I've taken and pasted newspapers up on a wooden, some wood basically, and then chosen to paint on top of that. And then in the past, the argument within art history has been, oh well, Africans are so poor and they don't have access to real canvases, so therefore they're painting on random materials. And I think that that argument is flawed because it takes away from the agency of these artists in choosing how they represent their work. And so 3 of the artists included in that exhibition are artists who have, taken the time to pick up the newspapers in their local area, selected which, dates and texts were really important to them, and then assembled that into the background and then painted on top of it. Which creates, to me, a level of relationship with the surface, with the materiality that is, you cannot separate the work from the materials that are being used in that case. And that is something that is an example of something I've been really interested in, and is a part of a larger understanding of African art right now. Probably one of the most famous African contemporary artists that I would encourage you guys to look into. His name is Ibrahim Mahama. He's from Ghana, and he uses repurposed textiles, objects, archives to recreate his works. And so, if you're familiar with jute sacks, which are these brown bags that we often transport cocoa in, he takes these jute sacks and creates fantastic sculptures out of those that he puts up on the wall, that he covers buildings in, and he has become kind of synonymous with what African art, one of the themes that are sort of prevalent in African art, and materiality is the core of his practice, and I get to work with him as well, so that's very exciting. So that's one of the themes I'm interested in.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for the question. Any other questions from the audience before we close up? Cool. Then I think I'll just say thank you guys. Very much appreciated. Thank you for sharing the words. Where can the people contact you if they want to come and
Thank you so much. This is fun because as a curator, you're usually behind the scenes. and the artist is the one at the front, so I'm very grateful to have this opportunity. You can find me, my name is Max Diallo Jacobson, or in Swedish Jakobsen, so you can just search that up. I have a website, an email if you ever need any advice when it comes to art, if you're thinking yourself of acquiring art, or working on an exhibition or anything, I'm always open.
Thank you. Thank you.
Den här som vi gör, den här är pulsen till takten som ni kommer att hålla när konfen kommer att stå. Okej? Så här ska det låta. Ja? Det. Ett sätt att lära sig att när man ska lära sig spela västafrikanska lek. Ibland vi brukar säga, kan vi säga bam, 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 ta, 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 okej? Bara säga utan att slå. 1, 2, 3, oh! Bam, 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 ta, 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 bam, 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 bam. Cha, 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 cha. När man får den i kroppen, i hjärnan, det blir lätt att händerna hänger med. För att den här man spelar med handen, hur du slår, andningen följer sådär. Ja, vi gör en gång till. 1, 2, 3, oh! Så ni som har djembe. Finns det någon annan djembe där?
En annan djembe?
Massa massa. Du kan spela så väl. Men vänta. Okej? Du ska vänta. Vi som spelar djembe, man tar djembe mellan fötterna och du själv kan komma lite på kantstolen. Då blir det lättare att du kan hålla djembe med knä. Men om du står längst in, den behöver du stå på. Men de som har likadant som jag. Ja. Vi kör när man slår djembe Försök inte ha den här på kanten. Man kan skada sig. Man kan skada benet om man slår här. Det ska vara så. Det är de 4, 8 som ska vara på skinnet. Vi kör. Jag ska börja, vänta. Jag ska börja första steg. Vi gör när jag räknar 1, 2, 3. Vi gör PT, PT, P. PT, PT, P. PT, PT, P. 5 gånger. Men det låter så här. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Men när vi kör tillsammans då kommer jag räkna på 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Jag ska redan räkna på 4. Så det blir enkelt. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okej? Ni har också pulsen. På trumman, på djembe. Den här heter djembe. Den heter dundu. Efter. Jättebra, det där är eran puls. Boom, boom. Så missar man det där, du kommer gå ur från takten. Det är därför ni också har tack, 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 tack. Det är eran puls. Om man inte gör det där rätt, du kommer tappa takten. Okej? Men nu ska jag räkna 4. Jag börjar med dem först och sen kommer jag till er. Okej, vi kör. Men ni fortsätter. Jag kommer stanna och gå dit. Då ni bara fortsätter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kan vi köra lite snabbare? Ska vi prova? Ja? kommer köra på kanten och i mitten. Den här kommer ni köra här. Okej? Jag ska spela en gång till så ni lyssnar, ni hör hur det låter. Ja? Det är så här.
On a plus d'âge. marché. On man hoor bon. On man ska göra trumklass om du ska få det stag. Du vill göra någonting, vi finns här. Och bara sitta där. Ni får gärna ta våran kontakt. Det här är la Guinea-Förening, la Guinea-Förening-gruppen.